ask too, what do you say to people who think that PulseChain is the worst thing to happen to HEX? Like, how do you think about that? Because
it's a good question. Because it's obvious that on the surface, short term, PulseChain decimated HEX. It did. But I kind of, it's a good question. I kind of want to get into that, but I kind of want to finish the analysis first, and then I guess we'd dive into that on this longer time frame to see. I mean, the obvious thing is like long term, when the bull market really kicks up, HEX is gonna the prices to end stakes and HEX is gonna get really expensive on Ethereum. Until Ethereum pushes that new upgrade next year that reduces gas costs by a factor of 8x. Like until that comes live, there's going to be a period of time potentially where ending stakes in HEX makes HEX on Ethereum unusable for a lot of the stakers. So
yeah,
it was more forward looking to make another chain. But what you've done, there's negatives and positives to it. So I'm just trying to be open about that. You didn't really you killed HEX short term. You killed the momentum. You divided the community, and now you're looking for adoption of 3 other assets potentially: PulseX, and Inc. On top of HEX and HEX, and then if you go even further, Hedron, ICOS on the 2 chains, and so you've really complicated and convoluted and split buying power bunks, all these things. But because the liquidity is tied together by its bonding, pumping one will pump all of them at the same time. And the PulseX Inc. relationship is going to magnify the effect of that. So it actually is a piece of code that's helping, tons of little buys add up together to equal more buy and burn, to equal more potential returns for everybody by pumping the ecosystem as a whole. But yeah, and I just kind of touched on a lot of different ideas at once there. But the takeaway is that, yeah, short term it hurt because it was like, had we never gotten a PulseChain sacrifice phase, we may never even have gotten this. We might never have. We might have only topped out below 10 cents last cycle. So then, yeah, you would have maybe not have went up to 56 cents, but you also may not have broken below a penny. Maybe the price rate would have just been like trapped inside of here for longer, and it would be even more boring, and then we would have got out sooner. So we've just delayed the getting out part and getting back to all-time highs, is all because you're dividing the attention of the user base, not just between, and this is something that I don't even think the founder could have realized ahead of time, was that when he uttered the word sacrifice, he didn't realize that the hundreds of thousands of hexagons were going to go and create 100 different sacrifices and 100 different projects. And I think he just thought that his user base was tied to HEX and that they wouldn't try to compete with their own bags, but he was wrong. So yeah, it hurts short term, but long term, if you get a 10x increase in new users, then it doesn't matter because that'll take care of everything, right? Because you'll get a whole bunch of new money in, right? And that'll just change the entire dynamic.
So it was just this kind of delayed gratification decision. Like, it's going to hurt in the short term, but it's going to set HEX up to have its own ecosystem, its own, playing field that's even with everything else, and we don't have to rely on Ethereum. And to me, it just kind of magnifies everything. It magnifies, Richard. It magnifies the bringing people in. I mean, I think onboarding, nothing else. And you touched on the pros and cons of onboarding. Yeah, you're bringing a lot more people in, but now a lot more sacrifice, a lot more projects, a lot more splitting buying pressure too with HEX and everything else. Definitely has some trade-offs, but I think it definitely feels like a long-term decision. Short-term pain, nobody wants to feel it, but long-term, it's not like HEX needed it, but I think it's almost like, I don't want to say Richard needed it, but like the whole ecosystem, long-term, needed something to sit on and like make sure, okay, too much mass is in this now. Too much mass. Too many people are interested. We have too many people in for it to ever go away. It's kind of the way I think about it. But yeah, short term.
Yeah, HEX isn't going away, and there's plenty of. You don't even need. How do I put this? PHEX is already like the combined hex price together, I mean, kind of tells like a different story altogether. So like when you put the hexes on the chart, shout out to Dipcatcher for doing this. I think hexfire.io did the same. These guys have put these charts together that show what happened, and this was just crazy. This was arbitrage between the two chains where value extractors came into the ecosystem and just extracted value out through the opportunity that was the pump off PulseChain launch. And there's no way to work around that. Like when you have like a new chain launch and you have these guys building up 2 years of wait time, and then they want to make a move. They've been waiting this whole time. They did. They were ready to go, and they had plenty of time to think about it. And so like there was a good chance that the hex price recovered off this level here, which was like the snap down low of like what was it, like what was this on here, 1.8 cents on the EHEX. But then the combined hex prices actually got back up tier to resistance, which was at 6.4 cents. And then it was just literally value extractors and arbitragers that actually just pushed us even lower. And then, people emergency end staking, chasing yield farming. So really this whole period here was people like making good returns by making actionable moves on the chart or wrecking themselves. And it was a combination of the two. But yeah, we're actually getting like this level is being respected. So the combined hex prices is actually bottomed around the same levels that double bottomed there in January on the 5th, around that 1.8, 1.7 cent level. So, if you're holding both, or if you capitulated one side into PHEX, then you're looking pretty good, right? Because you're still above the technical market cycle lows across the both of the hexes. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard to admit. But what do we've gotten this run up leading into testnet V3 and then mainnet? If we didn't have some news event, that's a good question. Would we have gotten this move from last year? Would we have gotten that move up? Or, sorry, that's 2021. That's over 2 years ago. Would we have gotten that move from 10 cents to 56 cents without PulseChain sacrifice phase? Maybe not. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten that. And so then the chart would look a lot different. You would have seen something like this, and we would have done it anyway. But yeah, I don't know. But those are good questions. And so I think what all you've done now is you've laid this huge floor, this like bedrock of like, and the prices are so depressed now that it's just going to be a slow recovery phase here until we look really good off to the races. And I